Hello, everybody. If you're coming back to see this discussion about the Wheel of Time, I've got our guest that we had yesterday. We're going to have him back on today, and I think we're going to be a little more focused this time around and try to stick to episode 2 of season 1 of the Wheel of Time. So I'm going to go ahead and keep this intro kind of short. I appreciate the people that do watch it when I'm not streaming. I will. I have a YouTube setup that I can link these in the chat. They're a little more permanent, so we don't get lost. And I'm gonna go ahead and bring him on, and we'll just kind of dive into it. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here, man.
Hey, welcome back.
Yeah, excited to get into this.
Yeah. So right before we started, you said you had just watched it again, the episode 2.
Yeah. Yeah, and man, I'm really enjoying going back through this a second time. Um, like I was telling you earlier, I feel like watching it just from a show viewer's perspective. I hit on a little bit in the last episode. You get a little bit of character fatigue. You're new to the story, don't really understand everything going on just yet. Uh, but the rewatchability of the show is nice, and I'm definitely enjoying it more the second time around than I did the first time, which I'm excited about as well. So I'm ready to jump in.
Why do you think that is? Because you said you started the book as well, and
Yep.
do you think that is contributing to your rewatch? Like, would you have wanted to rewatch it without starting the book? Like, what
Yeah.
do you
So
think?
so I've kind of thought about that a little bit, pondered on it a bit. Like, do I want to read the book? Because I think at least for the first episode, maybe first two, it's going about 10 chapters an episode. I know they get a little wonky further down the line, but I'm like, do I want to read the book, get to a certain spot, and then go rewatch the episode, or do I just want to binge it? Because deep down inside, the show watcher in me just wants to just eat this stuff up. But I think for me, the reason I'm enjoying it more the second time around is just the first time you view it. Like I said, you have the character fatigue in a way, or just when you start any show, you just don't really have any connections built to the characters yet. And now that I've seen 2 seasons and I've also started the book, I just feel a little bit more connected to each character and the story. I know where it's going. It's exciting to read the book because you get what actually happens versus what they do in the show. But to me, it adds to the depth of the story that you get to watch on the screen. So while I know it's not one for one, I still enjoy the show because I knew I enjoyed it the first time around.
Right.
So I'm going into this understanding that there's going to be differences, and I'm not going to be upset about that. Um, but also at the same time, I'm not crazy far in the book to the point where I'm noticing drastic things. Here in episode 2, I started noticing some pretty big things, at least just for where they are in the story. Um, but I still enjoyed the show. I still liked some of the things they had going on. They kept furthering the relationship between Rand and Egwene,
Right.
which isn't really happening in the book. And I'm enjoying that on screen. But I'm sure we're going to get into it throughout this episode. So where do you want to start?
Well, just a final thought. I mean, I read the books once a year, and I go back for the same reason that you went back to the show. You know, I started watching the show and immediately wanted to go back and read the series again, and that's that's what I did. I finished season 1 and season 2 of the show, and then immediately hopped into the gigantic series just to finish it. You know, I wanted to get another read under my belt, try to refresh some things in my own head before I wanted to try and attempt to tackle this because you know I think the reality is nobody can dissect every aspect of you know what's different and what's the same and what was right and what was wrong. Um, that being said, I wanted to start with something small, um, and I didn't get very far in my rewatch again today. and I wasn't really looking for it the first time. So I guess my thing that I wanted to talk about, yet yesterday we kind of talked about the weather, and I don't know if I talked to you about the magic, because the magic in the show is going to be visible, and but in the book there's not really a lot of visible magic going on. I mean, what do you have any thoughts about that?
Thoughts on how the magic looks,
Yeah.
or how I see it compared from the show to the book?
Well, how it looks from your perspective, just watching the show. What do you think? I mean,
Yeah.
what's your impression of it?
So definitely starting out. I mean, I don't have any uh, preconceptions of what it should look like, or how magic is used. So just being a show viewer for me, um, I mean, at first I thought it was a little wonky to see these like strands of swirls of whatever aura or power, the one power. Um, but I liked how the show took it further down the line, especially kind of towards the end of season one. But just at the start, I don't really have any impressions because I don't know what it's supposed to look like. So I'm just kind of taking it for what the show is saying it should be.
Okay, and after and we see some magic on screen in the book
Hmm.
up to this point, so we're seeing some of it. I think the real first time you see something happening is when Moraine is refreshing the horses.
Yeah, I mean, she even uses it in episode one, when the Trollocs attack. She's standing there in the town center, with Lan at her back, um, using the one power to it seems like lightning bolts are coming out of her hands. Uh, I think that was my first taste of it, but I did see it in season two, like you said, whenever she was trying to refresh the horses. Um, yeah, it was interesting to see this episode kind of break down because I didn't fully remember it because it's been 2.5 years since I've seen season one, so I forgot a lot that happened in the show. But coming fresh off of the book at this spot, I was kind of thinking it was going to unfold that way and seeing it kind of flip roles where Lan was more, I guess, leading the charge, leading the group, so to speak, and this episode was a little different than I anticipated. But in terms of magic, I don't feel like I saw a whole lot in episode two. Oh, well, actually, I take that back. Right there at the beginning, she uses the one power to sink the ferry
That's
right off the
true.
bat. So I forgot about that.
That's true. She
And
does, and that was one of the scenes that I wanted to talk to you about, because I'm gonna bring it up on Sunday, but I just wanted to kind of see what you thought about it. So in the show, Lan makes it pretty obvious that Fairy's gonna leave. He walks over with a sword and cuts the rope, and then Moraine stands front and center and makes a bunch of motions with the visual effects of creating the whirlpool, and that's kind of it's different than the way it plays out in the book. So
absolutely.
in the book, the whirlpool just kind of appears, and everybody's like, "There's no whirlpools in this river." And then the fairy is gone, and Moraine's like, who knows? I don't know what happened to it. And I just want to know what like if that struck you as odd, or if you noticed when you were reading the kind of different mentality that Moraine has.
Yeah, so definitely the show Moraine and the book Moraine, I feel like are two different faces of the same person in a way. Um, but yeah, I mean, as watching the show or in watching the show, it didn't strike me as odd the way that it was going down. Now that I've got a chance to go back and read through the first book, it did stand out that it happened differently. But I kind of liked the way that it happened in the show, in that it sort of started to cause some tension, um, especially between Rand and Moraine and Egwene and Moraine. Uh, and each Rand and Egwene kind of took different paths down that when they were conflicted with what happened. I think Egwene kind of understood and realized, okay, she took it for what was really happening, and that Moraine has her own motives,
Right.
and she's trying to drive the group for reasons unknown to them, but at the end of the day she's protecting them, she's doing what she can to keep them out of harm's way. And Rand's a little taken back in that he's, confused with what's going on. um and I like how they were showing Land's face, because Land's a man of few words. He had a lot of cool facial expressions in this episode. So it was kind of cool to see what that caused, because that really wasn't in the book as much. I think they kind of hint at it later. The group kind of starts talking about what are the motives here, what are we doing. But the book or the show obviously has to fast forward that, and I think it played out pretty nice. Obviously, they're not going to be able to touch on everything one for one. So with this, I thought that it was well done.
Okay. Um, I mean, I agree with everything that you're saying. Like having gone back and watched with a little bit more open perspective, I enjoy what the show is doing, and like this isn't like a show bash or a book bash or anything like that. I just kind of want to talk about the differences and like if you see, not. I'm just trying to see if there's inconsistencies that you're noticing, and it sounds like you're seeing all the ones that are pretty common and I mean just I just wanted to bring up one thing. If I go back to the beginning of the episode, it opens with the White Cloaks, and the reason I brought up Moraine's magic is that she's making these hand motions. It's big and bold, great for the show, great visuals, but that's not how Aes Sedai work. And you saw that in the book where Moraine is just kind of chilling out. The ferry sinks. Oh, I wonder what happened. So the reason I bring that up is in the scene with the White Cloaks at the beginning of episode 2. If you go and look, the an Aes Sedai from the Yellow Aja is tied up on a post and is on fire or about to be on fire
With their hands cut.
with her hands cut off. Now, it is true that not having your hands would make it difficult, but it's not impossible. She doesn't. It's brought up more so later on in the books, but like if Moraine can sink the ferry without moving a muscle and play it off as, oh, I don't know what happened, an Aes Sedai tied up on a post would still be able to channel. So, is it bad for the show? I don't think so. I just think this is where I start to see potential problems with the plot. Now the Aes Sedai in the show always have to have their hands free. They can't be tied up or have their hands removed, or they won't be able to channel. So, I just wanted to bring that up as kind of like where I want to focus my attention as I continue on this little journey. And I didn't know if that bothered you at all. Like, does that bother you reading the book? I mean, you haven't seen any Aes Sedai captured or whatever because it doesn't happen the
No,
same way. So,
I mean, for me as a show viewer, I like the visuals. I like seeing her swirl the one power around. Um, I like seeing it brought to life on screen, with some actions to it. For me, I mean, I didn't even realize, because the amount of magic I've really seen in the book has been very little. And like you said, they don't have the motion. So, uh, for me, I almost read it and I view it in my head as if she's doing something similar to that, uh, that they just didn't write. I'm just picturing it play out the way that I've seen it in the show, which is what I do with a lot of the book, which is the reason I like watching a show or a movie before I read, because I get to put a face to the name. I get to put characters in a setting in the world. It's just a little easier for me to piece it all together. But that doesn't really bother me, not having motion with magic in the book. In fact, I didn't even really catch that until you brought that up.
Yeah, I mean it's a minor thing, and I don't want to like beat a dead horse, about the topic. Like everybody is aware that there's differences. My only concern is going to be like the beginning of the plot hole. If you change the magic system in any way, it can create problems for the show writers later on. There's things that happen that that scene at the beginning of episode 2 could cause complications for. And I just,
Yeah,
they can just wave their magic wand and say, oh, it's different. But I, the consistency is going to get called out even for you if you watch episode 2 and then, say season 3 or 4 or whatever. You got some chick that's got her hands cut off and she's still able to channel. You're going to say, well, what happened? What happened to that chick at the beginning of episode 2?
yeah.
And
But
so
you're also implying that they're going to take everything one for one from the book, which track record shows they're not going to do.
they're not. That's
And
right. They're not.
they can make it work on the show
Right.
without with getting around that. So while I get your point, it does kind of dig them in a hole, for things that come up later. It's not impossible for them to get around.
Right.
Like, I don't know where that comes up in the story yet, but it doesn't seem. I mean, for them, they're just kind of willy nilly making things happen, loosely tied to the book at some points, especially here in episode 2 and Shadar Logoth, their time there. That happened very differently. But like I said, I still enjoyed the show the way that they portrayed the story there. It's definitely different. There's some big things missing. Um, but there was a lot of moments that I liked that happened in the show that didn't happen in the book. So that's kind of where, I got some give and take. There's things that don't happen. It's not one for one, but there's things I appreciate that do happen in the show that didn't happen in the book.
Do you have an example of that?
Yeah. So towards the end where Matt gives his dagger to Perrin that his wife made, I don't remember that happening in the book.
That's an excellent scene, and that scene couldn't have happened in the book because Perrin isn't married at that point, so he couldn't he
Yes.
couldn't have lost his wife. And I agree, that scene is excellent. You know,
And I think it was really fitting for Matt's character too that they gave him that redeemable moment right before he goes to find the dagger.
it's a good contrast. I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. I did want to. So you've watched all the show, and
Yes.
I I don't think that anybody coming in is going to be spoiled by what's going on at the end of season 2. So at the end of season 2, we know who the dragon is, correct?
Yes.
So, and you've already read this chapter, but I want to point out that Rand unknowingly channels for the first time in a chapter that you have already read, and I just wanted to bring that up as kind of like a little breadcrumb, kind of what I was talking about yesterday, where you read it the first time or you watch it the first time, and on your second pass through, you're like, did I just realize? Did I just catch something? And that's one of those things.
Yeah. So that's gone right over my head. You would have to point out where in the book he channels, because I guess I'm just so used to the idea that he is the dragon that I wouldn't really think to catch something like that. Uh, and that's like a thing that I can appreciate the second time around. Like I was saying earlier, I already know who the dragon is. I already know all the relationships between these characters and where these arcs are going to start taking off. Um, so if you caught that, that is kudos to you because that went right over my head the first time through.
Well, I'm kind of cheating because I've read the entire series and it's brought up much later. But to actually find the paragraph and then where it's referenced right after that, it took a little work. Like I had to look for it. I mean, it
What
did.
chapter is it?
So it's the the road to Taran Ferry. It's chapter 11.
Okay.
So in the scene, Rance is says, with all his heart and desperation, he silently shouted at Bella to run like the wind, silently tried to will strength into her. His skin prickled and his bones felt as if they were freezing, ready to split open.
Yes. So I do
And
remember that. To me, that doesn't, as a first time reader, I wouldn't catch that as him channeling.
no,
I thought he was just like, in a manic mode, just trying to run from the Trollocs chasing him, and just hoping that he could wish this horse to go faster, you know.
right, and that's the breadcrumb. So if you go a little bit further on in the same chapter, right before we get to chapter 12, uh, Moraine is refreshing the horses and is and she says, "You were right about Bella, Rand. She has a good heart and as much stubbornness as the rest of you Two Rivers folk. Strange as it seems, she may be the least weary of all." So Moraine catches it in the same chapter. She suspects at least. You know,
That's funny.
she's seeing that the horse that his love is on is magically stubborn or suspiciously more stubborn and hardy than these war horses or
Yeah.
horses that are made for riding. Bella's just a horse, but I mean,
Yeah.
you know, I
Which that point that you bring up, I noticed something in this episode that ties along with that nicely that I wanted to bring up, and that's when at what part was it? I think it's when Rand kind of questions Moraine. So I think it's the night after they have that dream, um, where he pulls the bat out of his mouth. They
right,
wake up. Happens differently in the book, but in the show, he pulls the bat out of his mouth with its neck snapped, and she's like, "Look, we got to get on the road." And Rand is not having it. He is not about this anymore. He wants answers, and he kind of puts his foot down. That stubbornness comes up, and I think Moraine, the show does a good job of showing her facial expression. She turns around and you see almost a smile on her face, like there he is. That's the guy I'm looking for. You know,
right.
you're not a follower, you're a leader, and that needs to come up. And I think she's trying to build that in the group in this episode when she gives the history of the Two Rivers to him, tells them the story about their people and that amazing fight that lasted the 13 days, and says to remember that the old blood runs deep in you, and you're going to need that in the days to come. So that what you're saying right there, Ty, caught my ear whenever I realized that scene. I think she kind of notices Rand's a little different from the rest. He's the one that's gonna stand up and question things and take charge.
That's an interesting point. I didn't really think about it that way, but you're right. She's she's controlling the situation, but she's also already starting to try to make sure that what she wants is is going to happen. Like she's going to get her way, and it's kind of on display. And I don't know if you noticed, but after everybody else leaves and then Rand reluctantly follows, did you see who was behind him in the background?
Oh yeah, Lan.
Yeah,
Yes, I caught that. I caught that because he took off with Moraine in the beginning.
right,
You know.
right. I thought
Yes.
that was I
So
thought
that
that
did
was a
not slip
nice
past me.
little, the nice little. To me, it was a nice callback to the book where there's a scene where Moraine basically threatens all of them. If I think the Dark One's going to take you, I'll kill you myself. And I just thought it was a nice visual. Like lands in the background, doesn't make any noise, but he's watching. He's always
Yeah,
watching.
he's always watching, and that happened a few times. Even after she sunk the ferry and the man with it, the I think the kids deep down they knew that that was the right thing, but their sweet summer child hearts didn't want to accept it. Um, and it stood out and ran a little bit more than the others, and I saw Lan keeping his eye on him. Because Lan is 100% behind Moraine in her decisions. Even if he doesn't agree with it, he'll do everything in his power to support her and prop her up from at least my view of their relationship. And so it stands out to Lan that Rand is the bucking horse of the group and is questioning things or not seeing her in the same light that Lan does. And I think he thinks others should. So that kind of stood out to me too because it cuts to Lan's face and he sees the disgruntledness from Rand among the others, but his eyes are focused on Rand.
Right, right. And I think for the show, for the show that works. They have to condense quite a bit of what's going on, and they have to show, not tell, because they can't spend, you know, 3 chapters explaining the relationship between Lan and Moraine. They kind of have to condense that down. So we've got somebody in the chat says, I'm interested in the Aes Sedai as a whole. I don't feel like the show did a great job of explaining who they are and what their history or role is in the world. It's been interesting to read in book one so far how the Aes Sedai are not viewed in the best light, and people seem to be wary of them. That's a very good point. They don't they do the show Don't Tell for the Aes Sedai in episode one by showing the magnificence of the White Tower. You don't know that it's the White Tower, but Moraine is decked out in the finest of clothes. She's in a tower that's intricately carved, and you know the that's the show's attempt, along with the scene with Leandrin capturing a male channeler, to try to show that they have power and they have wealth, and the two go hand in hand. I think that's their attempt at it. And then in episode two, where they're at the Tarn Ferry, the Master Hightower, whose ferry got sunk, and then he gets kind of pulled in with it, says, the white cloaks were right, or something along those lines. And I think that's their attempt to explain it. And I think they did an okay job, but I know for a fact that you're right that in the books the distances involved and how little some of these towns are traveled creates, the Aes Sedai are not people in the Two Rivers. They're a myth. They're a legend. So an actual Aes Sedai showing up in your town is frankly terrifying. You spent your whole life herding sheep or releasing badgers in the town. You're not, somebody that has the one power is absolutely terrifying. And you see that a lot portrayed throughout the series, how the distance away from the White Tower will influence how the town reacts to somebody that can use the one power. So that's a good comment. I like that you see the difference, and I appreciate that you've watched the show and are now reading the book. I feel like having that additional context, like my friend here, that's what we're talking about is the differences and good or bad. The show is what the show is, and it is entertaining, and that's for sure. So thank you for the comment.
That was really good. And along with that question, I noticed something similar too, in that the world doesn't really seem to know too much about the Aes Sedai, especially out in the Two Rivers. Like the scene where Moraine wakes Egwene and they go out in the forest and she's trying to show Egwene that she's a channeler, and she talks to Egwene about like whatever it is that you call it listening to the wind, but it's the wind that listens to you.
Right.
And to me, it was just surprising watching that in the show because I'm like, these women are so powerful, so wealthy, so well known, but yet the one power touches all the people across the land. At least from my experience, everybody that I've seen in some capacity have their own channelers, and it's weird from my perspective that they don't all understand that it's the same thing.
Right. Well, I mean, they kind of fleshed that out a little bit more. They have more room for dialogue in the book, but in Moraine's conversation with Nynaeve, that's that's exactly what she's talking about. Women can channel, but they don't all know that they are, or if they do, they don't understand that that's what it is. And that I mean, you've seen the Sean Chan channeling at this point with their chicks with the necklaces, and this scene with Egwene in the show and with Nynaeve in the book is is a call out. It's a big flashing beacon for somebody on a reread or a rewatch that the Aes Sedai don't know of everyone who can channel. And
Yeah.
I think it's a nice, of course they're going to try to squeeze as much into the show as they can, but this specific scene and making sure to include the dialogue, um, to mention that women will start to channel if they can, whether they want to or not. And I think it's a nice little touch on their part. They didn't have to hold to that scene as close as they did, and I like it. I enjoy the scene. I think it was done really well, and I like the kind of the hint. Like not every. I said I don't know everyone that can channel.
Yeah. I feel like I feel like each person they had their own moment in episode 2. You have Rand um kind of showing Moraine that not he's not a lamb, he's a wolf. I'm not here to follow unquestioned. I need reasons behind my actions. Uh and then you have the moment with Egwene and Moraine out in the forest where she shows her that she truly is a channeler. And then we talked about Matt having his redeeming moment where he gives the blade that Perrin's wife had made for him to get him out of trouble, uh, to save Perrin, to give that back to him. That was a really cool moment right before he takes the dagger. And then Perrin had his moment where the wolves show up. And I know you like this topic. I thought it was really interesting because you kind of hear the wolves, the howls as he's touching at his leg, and the show's kind of hinting that moment's coming, which it didn't happen in the book that way. But I liked how already they're kind of starting that. Let's get that into the story, that arc, um, which for me in the show I still fully don't understand Perrin's abilities and his connection with him. I know that there's some stuff there. I don't want to get into that right now because we're only on episode 2, but it was really a cool moment to see for Perrin. But I think that the show did a nice job touching on everybody in this episode.
They did do a good job. Um, I I've got my notes here, and I've made it most of the way through. I watched watched a show a few days ago, and I was trying to find some kind of hint that other than Rand and other than the knife that Matt has, do they show Perrin with a weapon at all? I cannot
No,
I cannot recall. I feel like
but in the book he definitely has one because they're all training
right, they have a scene
with
with
Lan.
Lan where they're training, but I was trying to find out if because I don't remember. Like I really don't remember because in the book they have a scene where they confront some Trollocs right before they go to Shadar Logoth, and they're training with Lan, and so they kind of need their weapon to survive. But
Yeah,
in the show, they're kind of it feels
just
like
on the run.
they're on the run and under Moraine's protection, and I think that's deliberate, and I think it's also kind of a breadcrumb, like what we talked about. This is a show breadcrumb that of the four people that are suspected to be the dragon, only one of them has a sword.
Yeah,
And I think that's a great breadcrumb for anybody rewatching. You go back and you're like, well, yeah, it's Rand. You know, how was I supposed to know that? And now, look, there's only one guy that's got a sword. Everybody else has either like a hand knife or something.
yeah, which was definitely a cool touch to see Matt with a dagger that he gives to Perrin, only then to replace a dagger.
That's true.
So
I'm not sure I
that
would,
that I definitely picked
I'm not sure I'd call that a good trade given the nature of the dagger.
up. No, no, no. But they're definitely foreshadowing that Matt's his love of daggers, or at least the will at times love for him and daggers.
It's true. So I've got here. So I don't where I'm at next. So we got the wolves, and then next would be next would be I guess Shatter Logoth. I think that's
Mhm.
I think that's right after that. You know, they try to go to sleep. I think, and Moraine is injured in the show, and I think you and I kind of talked about this already. But she's not injured in the book. She's just extremely tired. But she's injured in the show, and they go to sleep, and they can't wake her up. I think Lan makes a
Yeah,
deliberate effort to try to wake her up, and they're like, "We got to go."
yeah. It just throws her on the horse with Perrin.
Right, and I think her being injured is and not being able to get up is the reason why they have the kind of argument of whether to go there or not flipped. You know, in the
Hmm.
book in the book, uh, Lan very much did not want to go, and in the show, Lan is like immediately offering it as a solution, and Moraine is like, "No way." And
Yeah,
I think it was a good call by the show writers to flip it. You know, I think it could have gone either way. It's believable, and because she's gonna not be able to wake up because she's injured, it's got to come from somewhere. And I thought
yeah,
that was a good move on their part. So they go to Shadow Logos, and I went back and read that specific chapter to see if they describe the wall, and I don't know if it's exactly that tall. That wall in the show is very reminiscent of like Game of Thrones, the big wall that protects the North, the Great Wall.
oh yeah, yeah. Hmm.
Gives me those kind of vibes. Um, but it is a very tall wall. In the book, it's very tall. So I thought that was kind of cool. You show the big drastic, you know, how they're coming from a small little village, and look at this monstrosity, and how do they even build that? You know what I mean?
That's just it's another example of the world outside the two rivers that they just had no idea about. And I feel like you get that in the book, like we pointed out yesterday, that you know, as you're diving into this story, you know, you have so many unknowns, the history of the world, the lore, the relationships between people. and the show kind of carries that on where you're getting to see it from the group's eyes, where they're witnessing all this for the first time, just how great the people of these lands used to be, and how strong the dark one and his power must have been to break all of this,
Right.
or to throw the world into where it is now. um, I thought that was a really cool visual that they did.
I thought so too. I thought it was an excellent choice in the show to kind of, the kids in the book are getting kind of shell shocked at every corner, and
Yeah.
this is really the first time that they're blown away by how big something is. And I thought it was good show writing. And I'm looking over at my notes, and one of the things that I kind of wanted to talk about is Matt's acquisition of the dagger, because those play out a little bit differently. Um, I just wanted to know, like, your thoughts when you watched the episode. Like, what did you think about Matt's character when you saw that, like, the first time around?
Yeah, so first time watching through, my opinions of Matt were pretty negative. Um, like I did see that he had his redeeming qualities. To me, that only gave him belonging to the group. I wasn't gonna root for this guy. Like I said, I felt like he was the bad apple of the bunch. I didn't know where the story was going, so I feel like it's the beginning of his origin story. He's the good guy that turns bad, that eventually is going to be the nemesis of whoever the dragon is or the group. So I'm almost watching as if waiting to see him take the bad turn, to go down the dark side, take the Anakin route.
Right.
Uh, Now the second time around watching it, and comparing that to the book, it was kind of a bummer because I liked the way that Shadow Logoth went through the series, through the book, compared to the show. But at the same time, I do appreciate them kind of giving that contrast to Matt's character, because I feel like that is the one thing that Matt has that I the others don't, or at least I haven't seen it yet, to that extent, of Matt giving Perrin that dagger from Perrin's wife and then turning right around and finding the dagger. It
Right.
was a little underwhelming, that he just kind of finds it. Something's calling to him that drags him out of the chapel or building that they were sleeping in, and then he just randomly finds this dagger, and as soon as he picks it up, this black evil power starts to consume everything. Um, I mean, visually it's nice, but now knowing how it happens in the book and everything behind it, and Mordeth and Rand being there with him, and I believe Perrin was there with him. I think it was all three of them. They went to go help Mordeth go carry that treasure
Right.
back. It it was a little, not upsetting, but just different than what I would have liked to see. Um, but even to a point with the book, it was a little weird that these guys are in this abandoned city that's, like you said, they're just bombshelled by, they're shocked, and then there's this one creepy individual you find in the city, and you're like, you know what, I'm gonna go with that guy. Let's go see what he's doing. It was a little weird for me to see that happen in the book. I was kind of like, what are these dudes thinking? They're not picking up what he's putting down, especially when they start describing him the way he looks. I'd be out in a minute if I walked in on that. But definitely in contrast between the book and the show, I think the book had that beat by a long shot.
I think so too. I mean, rereading it recently, it is kind of silly. I get what the author was trying to get at. These are boys. They're young and headstrong. Matt is like driving Perrin and Rand, like, come on, we only have this one chance. Come on, let's go, let's go. And he's like, you know, I'll go by myself if I have to, basically. And the others are like, yeah, right. You're just gonna get us all in trouble. So they all go together, and they're out. They're out for longer than an hour in the book because Moraine has asked Nynaeve to give her something that she can let her sleep for an hour. And when they get back, Moraine's wide awake and super mad that these boys have run off.
Lan was gone looking for him, right?
That's
In the
right.
book,
Yeah,
if I'm not mistaken.
Land's out there looking for him. I need to take a quick break. I'm gonna pause it right here.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, welcome back. Sorry about that. I had to take a little personal break. Phone call I had to take. We were talking about Shadar Logoth, I believe.
Yes.
Um, I did again. It's a decision by the show writers, but I thought it was interesting that they spend um, a lot of their production value on like the magic system in the show, and yet they chose